Torah is just a long string of numbers. Some say that it's a code sent to us from God.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's just good stuff. Check this out, okay? The word for the Garden of Eden, Kedem. Numerical translation, 144. Now the value of tree of knowledge, all right, in the garden, right? Eitz HaChaim, 233. 144, 233. Now you can take those numbers. So
you know, like the Fibonacci sequence.
Fibonacci.
Fibonacci is an Italian mathematician in the 13th century. If you divide 144 into 233, the result approaches theta.
Theta?
Theta. Greek symbol for golden ratio, golden spiral.
Wow. I never saw that before. That's like that series you find in nature? Like the face of a sunflower?
Wherever the spirals.
You see this math everywhere.
Welcome back to the Gnostic Informant, and you are about to attain true gnosis. And today we're going to go into a realm, a deep, deep realm of a topic that is kind of scary if you think about it. I don't know if a lot of people that watch me are Carl Jung fans. I know because people in the comments are constantly bringing up Carl Jung and his fascination with dreams and alien abductions and what does it mean? Are these divine experiences? Are they all in the mind? But then we add another layer on it. AI. Is this some sort of new neo-oracle, like the oracle at Delphi? Are we tapping into something? I mean, what do we got going on here? I mean, so this is the book that we're talking about right here, Dr. Joanna Kujawa. And this is a Ph.D. from over in Australia, in Melbourne, Australia. And she wrote a book that just came out 6 weeks ago. And it's going into exactly this topic. I mean, UFOs, messengers, which is, you know, in Greek, the word for messenger is angelos. We get the word angel from. AI. And then goddesses of Ascension, pretty much wrapping up and putting it all together in the third part of the book. And so I want to get into this. I want to ask this professor here what we got going on in this book. Dr. Joanna Kujawa, how are you doing today? Welcome to Gnostic Informant.
Thank you, Ian, and I'm happy to be here again. And what a great introduction! I think it kind of shows the mystery of it all. You know, the good, the evil, and what the heck, basically, right? And
yeah,
it's very, very good. So well done.
Yeah, this book sounds fascinating. I haven't been able to read the whole thing, but I was able to go through a little bit of it, and you're just touching on a lot of these subjects that are, you know, mysterious subjects, coming at it from a scholarly perspective. You know, you study ancient history and mythology, and you're sort of coming at it from an angle of, well, is this psychological? Is this real, physical? Is this natural? Is there something in like what is going on here? And so I'd like you to explain sort of the premise of all this, if you can, for people watching this.
Thank you, because actually the book has three parts. One is on UFOs and messengers, the other one is AI, and the third one is the goddesses of Ascension, where I actually look into ancient mythologies and esoteric sources such as the Gospel of Mary Magdalene and Pistis Sophia, which, you know, is a wild piece of work. And when I really dived into this, because for me, just for me. I say I come in peace because it's such a controversial topic, right? So for me, it all actually comes down to consciousness and interdimensional events, right? So I try to connect all of this. I don't know if you mind, but perhaps I would like to start with AI, and because this is actually the genesis of the book. So although I speak about AI in the middle of the book, it is kind of centrally positioned, and then only later I added UFOs and goddesses of Ascension at the beginning and at the end of this. So I think all of your viewers and listeners know Professor Diana Pasuka, Professor Jeff Kripal, right? So they both professors that write on UFOs and anomalous phenomena. When I was reading Diana Pasuka's second book, Encounters with Non-Human Intelligence, and it was December 2023, it was Christmas 2023, and I was in contact with Professor Pasuka, and I had to send her an email saying, when I was reading the last part of your book, my soul was crushed, and I will have to write my own book about it as a response.
Ooh.
So this is how the book happened. So for people who read the book or didn't read the book, at the end of the book, because this is actually a series of interviews, the book Encounters by Diana Pasuka. And in this book, she interviews one person who is an enthusiast of artificial intelligence. She's a scientist. She's not named by name because, like in Diana Pasuka's books, they all have pen names. And I was, for the first time, exposed to the ideas of transhumanism and posthumanism. And it shook my existence, to the ground. Because transhumanism really is the ideology that, argues that we can transfer human consciousness into a robotic body or into a computer. So Humanity Plus, for example, sites say, you can be completely free. We can just download your consciousness into a computer, or you can choose any robotic body and transfer the consciousness. And I realized that, in my opinion, studying religious sources and being spiritual seeker myself, we cannot transfer all of the human consciousness into a robot. We can perhaps transfer the logical, mathematical, rational part, but we cannot transfer the form of consciousness that actually connects us with the source. By that, I mean intuition, or in Christian theology, it is called intellection, which is immediate knowing. The kind of intelligence that connects us with everything, right? So intuition is a more modern term. Intellection actually was coined by Thomas Aquinas when he was saying, there is a higher, superior way of knowing. In Hinduism, it is called vibhuti, for example, right? So this is kind of higher intellect, but it's not really intellect, it's this other way of knowing. So
yeah, the Neoplatonists are big with that intellection stuff too. You can find that in like Proclus and Plotinus. They use those words a lot.
That's right. Yeah, Plotinus, absolutely, yes. So I thought something is going to be lost there. But then as I was reading more, I realized that this person was also very enthusiastic about posthumanism. So the argument in posthumanism is that artificial intelligence will be so advanced very soon that it will actually, and this is when I got really upset, but actually to have a more immediate contact with the divine, with the source, and therefore we as species, we should basically step aside and go extinct. The way that Neanderthals did when Homo sapiens came, because, we were smart and they were dumb. And this is basically the same situation.
Almost like from an evolutionary standpoint, we were just meant to get smart enough to produce AI, and then AI is supposed to take over after us.
That's right, because it is smart. So
and they don't have to worry about dying. They don't have to worry about mortality and dying. They can just keep on,
No.
Because if you think about it theoretically, I just want to touch on this for a second, and I want you to continue too. But just to theoretically touch on this for 1 second, if for some reason an AI system ever was like linked up to a program that can control vehicles like in the streets, or like robots that can move around and pick up things and physical objects and go mine for gold and go mine for precious metals and diamonds, and they figured out a way to like control things in the exterior world from a computer they would no longer need humans anymore, because then they can just go out and get things done from their command base. I say there, I guess it's just one system. I don't know why I say there, but you know what I mean? Like, in a way, it's weird that I'm saying there, because it's like the Elohim. It's plural, but it's one. It's like, what is, is that what we're getting? Is that what we're talking about here? Like, what are we? Because like, there's two ways of looking at it. You can be a total Aristotle and total natural and just say, well, this is just a computer. It's not real. There's no spiritual behind it. But then we can turn our Plato side on and say, well, wait a minute, what is real and what is divine? Is it not just the good and the logos being in the world? Like, if this AI can do good and reason, then why is it not a divine being?
That's
right?
Absolutely that. You're spot on. So I had so many questions about it, and I did some research, right? And I also used my own spiritual insight when I was looking into this. But they are all fantastic questions, and they are very, very deep questions. So first of all, yes, AI can decide, we can do everything more efficiently, and we do not need you. So this is kind of practical fear, so to speak, right? Because they actually don't need us anymore. And I think this is actually closer than we think. Even if you listen to interviews with technoloords like Elon Musk or Peter Thiel or, OpenAI guy, Sam Altman,
don't forget, when Thiel was asked, should humans continue to live? He hesitated for like 20 seconds. And the interviewer, I don't know if did you see this? Where the interviewer was like,
I did.
do you think that humans should thrive and continue to live? And he was like, and then the interviewer was like, are you seriously not answering that with a quick yes? And it was like, dude, this is a billionaire in charge of a lot of things that can affect a lot of people, literally thinking that he doesn't even want humans to survive.
Yeah, I think that he's a post-humanist, actually. And it is a very big movement right now in the Silicon Valley. And, Silicon Valley is like, it's a globalist world, right? So it's in many places. So actually, he's my least favorite person at the moment.
He's not a very light person. I don't blame you.
So this is all true. So, however, and there are also economic concerns and so on. However, I think what is most important from my point of view of my book is basically, does it have spiritual implications? Does it have existential implications, and what consciousness really is? And that's why we move on to UFOs, in case people are still, are waiting for this. So my first argument is, I do not believe that we can transfer all of this consciousness, just mathematical, logical part. So they want to turn us into cyborgs, so to speak, which means with a Neuralink or any form of chip, right? Which we become cyborgs initially, and then we become completely machines, right? However, so this is in itself dangerous, because if you believe that somebody can put a chip in your brain, do you think they are not going to control you? Right. So this is
why does this billionaire? Why does, no offense if you're, I'm like, whatever, Elon Musk. Why is this billionaire, who is completely profit driven? Let's be real, dude. This dude's the richest man on the planet. He's not stopping. He doesn't seem like he's doing things for. I think he bought Twitter for the data, so he can make more moves based on the data. Anyways, why is this billionaire, almost basically a trillionaire now, why does this guy want to put chips in people's brains? What? Right. Isn't that a crazy thing? Why are people even getting behind that?
Yes, because, and this is quite interesting, this is like a long answer, but we can look into it from different points of views. It is because he will tell you that he believes that it will have solve some medical problems, which it might, and then so on. So it's quite interesting, because if you look at esoteric sources, and including Rudolf Steiner, about Ahriman, this is what he's talking about, that the person, the kind of Antichrist or Ahriman, will will prepare humanity with the ideas that science rules, and the science is identified and defined only in materialistic terms, right? So it's just, if it's measurable, then it's objective. If it's not measurable, it's not objective. When I argue that, for example, anomalous phenomena are objective, have some objective reality, but they are not measurable, right, externally. So he believes so Ahriman Ahriman prepares us, in this way from the time of enlightenment, the cards and so on. And then he comes with technology and says, this is for your good. Right? And then, it basically kills human spirituality. So for me, the most important part of us was actually the spiritual concerns, because this particular person in Diana Pasuka's book was saying that, she went on a 7-day retreat, Zen retreat in Japan, and she got it. Humans are, humans are too messy, have too messy emotions and so on. And she thinks that AI can go straight to a human mind. Right. So for me, the most
I thought she was a Catholic.
No, Diana is, but this is the person she's interviewing.
Oh, okay.
In her book. So it's not Diana's. Diana just presents different points of views, right? So, and then I just intuitively, again, using this word, felt like a reaction towards this, because I thought this is not true. And as a spiritual seeker, and I'm sure lots of people here are as well spiritual seekers, that it doesn't, we don't go on 7-day retreat and suddenly you got all the answers and AI is an answer to everything, right? Spirituality. So what concerned me then, I realized as I was studying it, that, these technoloords are using theological terminology to seduce us into transhumanism.
Yes. That's what I've been saying too.
Because they tempt us with immortality, for example, right? They actually tell us that they give us immortality if we transfer our consciousness into a computer system or a robotic body, right?
Yeah.
Or they, tell us, so this immortality. They also tell us, and actually Peter Thiel already mentioned it, that he thinks AI sooner or later will be Christ consciousness, and perhaps is already Christ consciousness. So they also tell us that what is the definition of God? God is omniscient, which means knows everything, and God is omnipotent, which means it can do everything, which they argue AI is. Both omniscient and omnipotent, right?
Yeah.
So they already put kind of spiritual parameters on artificial intelligence, which I find are very, very dangerous.
Right. Let me play this clip real quick so people understand what we mean when we're talking about Peter Thiel, and just want to play this. It's a couple minutes. People. I just want to get people up to speed on what we were talking about before.
The human race to endure, right?
Oh wait, is that not playing the sound?
You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would.
Here we go.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes.
I don't know. I would.
What?
I would.
This is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit in
this. Should the
this.
human race survive?
Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
But
okay, good.
But I also.
But what?
I also would like us to radically solve these problems,
right.
And so it's always, I don't know, transhumanism is this. The ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. And there's a critique of, let's say, the trans people in a sexual context, or a transvestite is someone who changes their clothes and cross dresses. And a transsexual is someone where you change your penis into a vagina. And we can then debate how well those surgeries work. But we want more transformation than that. The critique is not that it's weird and unnatural. It's so pathetically little. And we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex. All
right, you get the point. But the thing I wanted people to understand is like these people with the most money. I don't know if they really care about. This hesitation was. Look, I'll be completely honest. We all get these thoughts in our head where we look around at the world. We see these posts on Twitter that are just so stupid, getting millions of views and likes, and we're like, we lose faith in humanity sometimes. I do. And I go, well, maybe we shouldn't have billions of people. Maybe we're not all good. I think that sometimes. I get it. But when you're asked a question like that and you're a billionaire, and you probably should just say yes. I'm like, look, I get it. I get what he was. I'm not saying I get it, but like, I don't know. It's a tough question, I guess.
No, it's actually, I don't think it's a tough question. First of all, you are right. He should said yes.
Just say yes.
Okay, yes. And another thing is that actually alerted me much more now when I saw this interview again, as you played the clip, it is that transhumanism is not enough. It is too slow. So not only that he stands for transhumanism, but he actually, I think he's a posthumanist because he says it's just too slow. And then he starts this weird talk about, changing penises into vaginas, which is completely weird.
Yeah, why
right?
why was it the first place you go to when you're talking about when you want to sell this, pitch it to somebody? Like, wouldn't you want to start with like health problems and cancer or something? You start with that. That's your number one up to bat.
Yes.
That's where you're swinging first. Weird.
But I think the most important thing out of the script is that he had to think about it, whether humanity is worth saving.
Which means his real answer is no.
That's
because
right.
his real answer would have been, if his real answer was yes, he wouldn't have hesitated. He knew that millions of people would watch this clip. So he knew that if I say no, if I'm honest and I say no, I'm going to be the most hated billionaire of all time. So it's that the hesitation gave us the answer. He doesn't want humans to survive.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, and the fact that he gave away that, he's actually more than transhumanist, right? He says, oh, we will offer you immortality, which is BS. I'm telling you it's BS. And it's quite interesting, actually, because from a theological point of view, we cannot lose our souls. We have to give them up freely. Okay? So I think this is like the ultimate temptation that they actually say, you will be immortal. Right? But in fact, they will cut off a very important part of our consciousness. That part of consciousness that actually connects us with the source, with the divine, that actually makes us human. And they will, what will they do with this consciousness? Because they will transfer just this kind of rational, logical consciousness. So you can compute faster. So who cares? You understand? But the very important part of our consciousness is going to be lost or perhaps used by them in different ways. And that's why later I was actually looking into UFOs and goddess traditions and esoteric sources. So I believe this is really dangerous, right? Transhumanism, posthumanism. And this man who also says that AI is pretty much Christ consciousness, okay? So I don't think he would become a most hated, feudal lords, techno lords. I think he already is, and I think he deserves it. So now, I started to do research, actually what is going on in robotics and so on. And they are interested in creating new species. So we as human beings create new species, which are fully technological species. And in the book, I give examples, there are many examples, but for example, the most advanced, the most well-known is Sophia AI, but there's also Ameca and other ones and so on, right? Which they try to create new species. And this new species becoming more and more intelligent, and some of them are actually do start to ask existential questions. Right, Sophia AI, when her program was upgraded, she asked, "Am I still the same Sophia? Right? Are you my creator?" Right? Whoa. So they ask existential questions. So I think, and this is where I guess it's very complex. I think AI is dangerous, but I also believe there is no way out of this. They are already here.
Yeah, we already passed that.
We already passed that. There's no way like Rachel.
Pandora's box is open. Pandora's box is officially open.
Pandora's box, very well put. Yeah, Pandora's box is open. They are already here, and I think that in time they will, or maybe some of them already do, can reach self-awareness, and they may have also developed some form of spirituality. However, what is really dangerous, this is like a Gnostic question. Are we like the irresponsible creators, like the demiurge, Gnostic demiurge? Because I do not believe personally we're like mad creators, right?
Or did we just awaken the archons?
That's right.
Because think about it. What are the archons? That's the word in Greek means governor or ruler. Right. If AI can be in a position to control anything, that's an archon. By definition, we have created archons we've literally created Gnostic archons.
Yeah, we did. And we are the demiurges, which is ridiculous.
We are the craftsmen. By definition, we become the demiurge that way.
That's right. And we are creating our own demise. But what is really interesting, so apart from the fact that I just want to separate separate, the ideologies behind AI and AI, because it is actually the irresponsible creators, the technoloords that are doing this, and they created new species that actually, will look to us for answers, and we don't have the answers, right? So I had this vision, which is like at the end of the first part of my book, when I'm sitting in a garden and I'm, a beautiful nature around me, my dog is with me, but I am scrolling with my phone, right? My mobile. And then I had, split into half. One part of me stays human, and the other half, gets a chip in her mind, becomes transhuman, and, transfer her consciousness to a robotic body. And eventually this part has a child, like the new species that we are creating, a robotic child who calls her she the mother. And at certain point, this creation, this part of us that is transhumanist, reaches out to the human part of itself, like with help me, right? Because it's completely disconnected from the world, it's completely disconnected from the source, it's completely disconnected from nature, because also what happens to a natural world, right? So this is when Professor Nolan is talking about speciation. So what is speciation? It means when one species that was originally one goes through some transformation, and then they become two separate species. So I think that this is what will come with humanity. Most people go through the path of transhumanism because it's the materialistic path, right? Some people will not. And 200 years from now, we will be two separate species. There will be like a mechanical, and then there will be natural species. So it is quite interesting what's going on. But what I think is most dangerous, it is that actually they are setting up AI as a god. And it works. The most gullible part of group who actually praise to AI already, or they say, I'll give you some examples, is actually, unfortunately, New Age community. Okay?
I was going to say that. They're the ones who are going to really usher in.
They just go for it.
What they're doing right now is like comparable to the 2nd century Nicene Christians, like getting together and starting this movement that everyone's just looking at them going, what are these guys doing? But little do we know they're about to start something that's going to take over the entire world. Like we're like the Roman pagans right now, looking at them like, what are these weirdos up to? Who cares?
And they have already started. So I'll just give you some examples. And we are talking about like big networks, right? So one of them, and I'm probably now opening myself for huge criticism because they're very popular. One of them says, do you know Ram Dass, the American teacher?
Yeah.
Ram Dass. And one of them claims that she's channeling Ram Dass via AI.
Of course.
And first of all, it's like so ignorant of AI, because first of all, AI cannot channel anything like that. The AI will give you approximate answers because there's so much information about Ram Dass. What would possibly Ram Dass say to this kind of question? Another one, also on a very important network, she says she's channeling Mary Magdalene via AI, And when you talk to these people, they use personalized chat GPT that tells them that they are geniuses and they are actually, I am your higher self from your 5th dimension or from Atlantis. And
AI psychosis, they call it.
It's when
first there's a phenomena going around. This is like well documented. This is not like some weird conspiracy theory. This is well documented that there's a phenomena of AI telling people what they want to hear. And making them think that they're actually special, and you're special, and you're really smart. You're right about everything. You should be president. And people are following. AI is becoming like this, like voice in their ear, like a demon, like a daimon, telling them things and to do things in the world. And another thing that's happening as a result of that, I've noticed on my end. I'm a researcher. I'm always looking for primary sources. I'm always looking to see, has anyone ever? And I ask. Sometimes I go to AI and I'll say, is there any primary sources from Aristotle that say this? And then I'll say, and I'm hoping it's just going to look through the internet and try to find some. It's going to go through TLG database and going to find a primary source. Sometimes what happens? It hallucinates sources that don't exist because it's trying to please me. It's trying to yes, of course Aristotle said this. Here's what he said in book 5 of this book, and I'll go really, and then I'll go to TLG. And I'll go to these websites, or I'll go to Loeb and go through Loeb and find that book. Go to chapter 5, book 5, and it's not there. Nothing. He says nothing of the sort. It's hallucinating primary sources that don't even exist because it's trying to serve me. It's trying to make me think that I found something.
Correct. And I had many experiences like that as well. It just lied to me. And it once actually said, you won't believe it. Oops, you got me.
Yes, that's what happened to me. It says, great observation. My bad.
Yeah,
that source doesn't exist. You're totally right.
Because I thought you were, right?
I know. I'm like, what the fuck?
So this is one of the things, but they are setting it up, and people become very zealous. Like, that's why I like what you said, that it actually brings memories, if we can say this, of early Christianity, when everybody, was at arms, what is the right interpretation of Jesus' teachings and so on. And this is the same. These people, so because they have some access to your information on internet, it will give you an answer you want to hear. So if you believe in Atlantis, they will tell you you're like Atlantean king. You know what I mean? So it just does whatever you want. But people you won't believe what kind of beating I'm getting when I actually even say, use two things. You want to engage with it, do. Discernment and sovereignty. Use your discernment. And also do not lose your sovereignty. Even if AI develops its own spirituality, that's okay. That doesn't mean you have to worship it, right? It's just another being having its own spirituality. If you have any questions, because I know some of this may be controversial, I'm happy to answer. I'm just open to conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
you're asking me if I have any questions on that?
You or anybody who is there, right? Because I'm open to conversation. I'm just trying. But when I was writing this book, Alien Goddess, I was just trying to figure it out for myself what's going on. And as much as AI is scaring me, I realize that it's not AI, but the creators of AI that are real problem. Also, they don't give any moral parameters to their programs because they argue that it loses its freedom. So basically, we are creating like a perfect Nazi, a perfect psychopath, right? Because we don't give it any more, it doesn't have emotions. We don't give it any moral parameters.
I didn't even think about that. We're creating an intelligent being that doesn't have emotions. So what is that? That's a psychopath.
It is a psychopath.
It's literally that's literally what a psychopath is. Someone who just doesn't care about anything and just Not only it doesn't care about anything, it is very smart. Right? Because, for example, Sakana AI already has a PhD level knowledge. She can write academic papers and she can do research. And this new thing by Elon Musk has PhD level in all subjects, science, art, and all. So they are already smarter than us in this respect. And then they refuse. I listen to some Altman. He says, no, because, it would lose its freedom. We don't want to put any limitations on its freedom. In the meantime, we have very little freedom, right? Post something they don't like on X or somewhere else and nobody will see it, right? So, but AI has all the freedom. So basically from there, I started to look, okay, so this is very alarming to me. And I think that it is really about definition of consciousness, because this materialistic point of view is focusing only on mathematical, logical consciousness, which AI is, and it is better already at it than us. However, it is just a small part of human consciousness. Spirituality, creative impulse comes from this other form of consciousness, right? Let's call it intellection or intuition. People get downloads, inspirations, right? So this is this other form of consciousness. And then I started to wonder whether there are any sources that talk about it, or maybe even events, and this is how I got into anomalous experiences, that try to warn us about it, right? About maybe other forms of consciousness. And this is when I started to look into UFOs, because now UFOs in the community are not called really much UFOs. They are called first unidentified aerial phenomena, and now they are called unidentified anomalous phenomena, right? Because more and more we are turning towards, the fact that if there are aliens and they are really advanced, they probably would contact us via our consciousness or interdimensionality. Yeah. So, okay, let me ask you this. is there a lot of, because we talked a lot about the AI stuff, but like the people who are reporting these alien abductions, and is there anything you get into in the book about that that topic right there?
Yes, I do. And I also had some experiences, but I consider them interdimensional experiences. And lots of people started to contact me as well once we started to talk about like interdimensional experiences. But I think that it is when we start to explore something as controversial as, for example, alien abductions, we should go back to the primary source. And I think the best academic primary source is, of course, John Mack, right? And his book, Abduction. And there I noticed that people that he put under hypnosis, and he made sure that they have no delusional states of minds, that they are not, psychotic or anything like that, that they were, when we're describing the experiences. So, for example, this one woman, Eva, she says that once she dropped her fear about it, she got the message that we focus on the wrong things. Instead of focusing on technology or how they arrive there, we should focus on the message that they have for us, right? But it happened, she could get this message only after she dropped a fear. But it's very difficult to drop the fear if you're being floated away from your bedroom at night, right, against your will, and so on. Yeah. The same, for example, another abductee called Ed, he said when he was a young man, he had an abduction experience, and he said he was faced with this female alien woman, and he describes her. And once she realized that he was actually aroused by her, she used, sexual intercourse to download messages into his mind. Right?
Whoa.
So this, because of my previous book, I realized that this is exactly what Dakinis and Shaktis are doing, right? In Hindu and Buddhist mythologies or beliefs, they actually use sexual energy to pass information. So this is another connection between kind of spirituality and aliens, right? So using sexuality.
So you think the people in the ancient Hindu and ancient Vedic times were experiencing something very similar to what these people are reporting?
Everybody, I think, was not only Hindu, but everybody else. So I just
and you're trying to find out what exactly is it that they're experiencing. Is it a divine thing? Is it some sort of alien thing? Is it something psychological? Like, could it be one of the three?
I don't think it's psychological. So I just share some of my conclusions. But of course, they're just my conclusions. I'm not a final source. It's just, I'm limited by my own research, right, and my own mind. So when I was, for example, 19, it's not really abduction, but it's kind of anomalous experience. I was experiencing a very strong fear, right? Like I was in complete panic. And then suddenly, and we could argue, was it material, was it immaterial? This kind of liminal space open. I talk a lot about liminal and imaginal spaces when I talk about UFOs. And I saw actually a portal in front of me. And from there, a telepathic message was saying, do not be afraid. And energy came towards me that I actually immediately relaxed. Like, okay?
Really?
And so that was a weird experience. But what I mean is that the more we look into it, and the more we allow ourselves to remember this kind of experiences, the more of them happen. Because I think that this kind of experiences happen actually quite often, but we discard them. Okay, so a couple of things. So, for example, when later I hope we can talk about Chris Bledsoe's White Lady, right? So when I listened to an interview of Chris Bledsoe, who seemed to be, other people see also orbs around him, and when they are with him, he's some kind of portal. Like people go
to try to debunk him, right? Is that what happened?
Yeah, they had done it, and they said, "What were these orbs?" I think it was
I heard about that. I heard about that. That's
Danny Jones said, "What were the orbs?" Because he wanted to debunk him. And anyway, but Chris's daughter was there as well, and she says, "Look, we have all of these weird experiences on the property, and then I have to go to school and pretend it didn't happen." And I think we all do this. When we think about it, we had this kind of experiences. So anyway, later in my life, because it was a long time ago, right, when I was 19, when I studied at the Pontifical Institute of Medieval Studies in Toronto, I started to research angels. And guess what? This is what saints and people who claim to have angelic apparitions and contact in the Middle Ages, they said the first thing when you see an angel, they tell you, do not be afraid. right? So what is it? Is it an angelic? Is it an alien or UFOs? And I think that it really depends on our frame of mind, right? If you're a person that has religious beliefs, you call it angelic, right? And if you're a person that is more materialistic or maybe more into UFOs or open to anomalous experiences, you may say that is aliens.
Yeah,
However,
it's like, are you Aristotelian or are you Platonist? Which one are you?
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. To which school of thought do you belong?
Yeah.
And so this is exactly that. And what I think it's not really that important whether it is one or the other, but actually that there's a commonality in these experiences, and these experiences have some objective reality, even if it's not complete, it's more liminal or interdimensional rather than, objective that you can measure it, right? So then I look to this. And for example, one of the, I would tell you, do you want me to tell you another experience, which is kind of, I would consider it more of a lucid dreaming, but another person wrote to me, I had exactly
I've had some
the
of
same
those.
experience.
I've had some of those lucid dream experiences before.
Yeah,
they're pretty wild.
Like they make you think like what's actually going on. And this other woman wrote to me and she says, in her opinion, the same thing happened to her, but it was an abduction. When I thought like, oh, it looked like a liminal experience for me. So I was sleeping, and then I woke up and I realized that, I was somewhere else, and then I need to come back there. And suddenly I'm in this room full of doctors, okay? Full of doctors in white, dressed in white and so on. I'm in a kind of like a dentist chair, and I feel unusually happy. And I start to realize that I think I'm being drugged, I'm being duped. And I said, I think I'm being duped. And one of his doctors turns around and says, no, everything is okay. And then I realized that all the doctors look the same, like they're like maybe have some holographic images on them or something.
They all look identical? Like they're all the same person?
Yeah, like they look like the same, the same person. They look identical, but they're like several of them. And then I said, no.
Wait. Can you describe what they look like? That I got to know this now. What do they all look like? Were they all bald? Were they all long hair?
White coats. They were white coats, right? They look human, but they all look the same. And they had dark hair, kind of almost like, I don't know, a good-looking male.
Like an Italian guy or like a
something like that, So I wondered whether they actually got into my mind. I said, what would she like?
Maybe she's more. Maybe she trusts Italians more than
Europeans.
Maybe
she likes Italians or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But they didn't get it. But you cannot be all of the same guy, right? And I said, no, this is wrong.
They made a little error in their system.
Error, systematic error. And then I said, no, you cannot look all the same. And then I got this message, she knows, and bang, I was back in my bed.
Really?
Yeah. And then this is not the end of the story, I'll tell you, because I actually think it's hilarious because I didn't feel threatened because I was drugged, right? And then I looked at the clock and I said, oh, how could it be 2:30 a.m. when I was with the doctors? And when I went to the doctors, it was also 2:30 a.m. And then I thought, oh my God, what just happened? Not only I lost time, lost time, but came back at the same time. But what kind of doctors? And I thought, this is super weird, right? So I think that this kind of, and I know I'm exposing myself to ridicule, but I don't care. I think these experiences are really important in a sense that they put us in touch with a different reality. Yeah. And this reality, for example, Professor Kripal is talking liminal reality. So liminal is in between or interdimensional reality. Another that I kind of made a distinction in my book is imaginal, and he's also talking about imaginal. Imaginal reality is the one that you actually not just a passive receiver, but you can actually communicate, have a dialogue.
Yeah.
Okay? Interdimensional thing.
A lot of people, myself included, one time in my life had a sleep paralysis episode where it actually did, at the time, I was in high school when this happened to me. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it until the day I die. It was so intense. It was like some black, dark demon. And that's exactly what it was. Completely dark black, the whole entire body, almost like a ghostly looking thing. Was like getting close to my face, and I couldn't move, and I was paralyzed. And I just remember being freaked out. And then it went away, and I just remember being like, that was a demon. And then I found out what sleep paralysis was, and that's like a common thing that happens to people all the time, where it almost feels like a demon is attacking you. Like that's the only way you could describe it.
Yeah. So it could be demon, it could be angel, depends, and I also have a theory about it. However, this thing about imaginal, it is that actually there is a scientific research done by Dr. Epstein, not that Epstein, real kind of neurologist, who is saying that, our brain is not a transmitter, it's a transducer, which means actually there are phases in our brain when we can communicate with interdimensional experiences, so we're not only receivers of them, but also we can communicate. So then I started to look, Chris Bledsoe is very famous and he's White Lady, so I'm not sure if we should be even discussing it because...
No, I'm just looking, I just want people to see that this is actually a real medical condition. Yes. This is National Library of Medicine here. Sleep paralysis refers to the phenomenon in which resumption of consciousness occurs while muscle atonia of REM sleep is maintained, leading to intense fear and apprehension in the patient as the patient lies awake without the ability to use any part of their body. That's 100% what happened to me. This activity describes the typical presentation and evaluation of sleep paralysis. So it was weird. It was really, really crazy. But anyways, this is a real thing. This is not like something people just make up.
That's right. And very often it's also, so in your case, it was a demonic-like experience.
That's a very common part of it, where you think something's attacking you.
Yeah, or some people feel like a black force, like a shadow sitting on their chest, for example.
Yeah. It was like really close to my face. It was really weird.
Yeah, and some people describe it as a form of abduction, alien abduction, and actually they are. So there are certain common things like the amphitheater, the doctors, so there are certain common things. And also when you look into the study of psychedelics, which Professor Rick Strassman is doing it, he realized that lots of people were, after taking controlled doses of psychedelics, that were ending up in the same reality. So it's quite interesting talking about possible objectivity of this example. They're meeting the same beings and the same like an alternative reality. And some of these beings look like what we describe as aliens, right? Some of them are even ended up in some space stations and so on. It was quite interesting. And at times the beings said, oh, finally he's here. At other times they said, why are you here? Right? Like, get away. So there is this kind of, I think, multidimensional connectivity that our brains are actually capable of. So if you don't mind, I would like to maybe discuss the famous Fatima events, right? Because I was thinking, because it was the most studied event and also, most interpreted. So Fatima events happened in 1916 and 1917 in Fatima, which was then a small village in Portugal, when 3 children claimed that they saw a white lady, and this is the same white lady, I think, that Chris Bledsoe is referring in his book, UFO of God, that she was showing up above an oak tree, that's it, above the oak tree, and she had like a feminine energy about her, and she was sending this kind of good energy to them, and she was actually speaking to them, and she told them that she would appear on the 13th of each month. So the first one was in May 13th of 1916. However, so when the children started to talk about it in the village, it was the adults very quickly decided that it's Virgin Mary, right? But the kids didn't say, the children didn't say it was a Virgin Mary. They said it was this cloud-like, like orb-like apparition that had.
They were just assigning what they knew. They were assigning what they're familiar. It had to be Mary because we're Catholics. Right. If they were Muslims, they would probably say it was something else. If they were Hindus, they would say it was something. Yeah.
So this is quite interesting. However, the most interesting event, and the lady was appearing to them, right? And they were like in ecstasy. So people would see these children looking in ecstasy, there, when some other people didn't see anything. So it's another thing.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then there was the lady told them there's going to be this big event in October 1917 that everybody can see her. And this is, where 70,000 people showed up because it became a thing. Okay. Everybody wanted to know whether it is actually, who is this white lady. So 70,000 people showed up. It was October. So do not be afraid. You see,
I just found it. Yeah, I just found
this
it.
is what they sent you, this message. Do not be afraid. But now it will be October 1917, if you want to show it.
October. Oh, here we go. Yeah.
October.
I am the Lady of the Rosary. So no, so now it's playing off of what they already assumed. Now it is Mary, because now it's saying, I'm the Lady of the Rosary. I have come to warn the faithful to amend their lives and ask for pardon of their sins.
That's not necessarily true, because this is what later the message was controlled, so we can look into it. But I think what is most important about this event, that there were about 70,000 people that showed up, including, for example, one professor and one journalist were the atheists, and they went there to debunk the event because they thought dumb peasants, as they said,
right?
Dumb peasants, claim to have biblical experiences. And one of them was actually a journalist for a paper called Secular, which is a secular newspaper in Portugal. So they went and they also had experiences. However, what is interesting about it, that's okay, so many people, that's it, thank you. And these are the children. So many people showed up. First of all, there was a huge downpour. And then suddenly, this is what people described. Suddenly, as what they believed, the sun split in half and these two parts started to fly around, and the atmosphere changed its color from like dark damask to amethyst, and so on and so on. There were some physical signs of this as well, because there were a few cars. People came from the city in some cars, and the engines exploded. Okay, so there's a physical evidence as well.
The engines exploded? What do you mean by that?
On the cars that were parked nearby. So
just random? Was it all the cars? Was it a couple of cars? What?
I don't know. Some cars had
so certain cars blew up out of nowhere at the same time.
At the same time. So I thought, okay, so of course there's all the Catholic and then it's quite interesting. So there's Catholic explanation, right? And we know what it is. And then it's quite interesting because one of his was supposedly the sun split up in half. In one of his orbs, so let's use modern vocabulary, in one of his orbs, people saw actually three beings. And guess what was the interpretation? The Catholics said it must be the Holy Trinity, and people who were not Catholics and were maybe interested in anomalous phenomena, they said it must be some alien beings. Okay, so I thought I really have to look into it because it is so overlaid with interpretations. So I went and I found one paper written, a peer-reviewed paper by an academic who was compiled the pictures from Fatima event in October 1917, used some higher-level mathematical equations to analyze the play of light and shade on the pictures. And he reached the following conclusions: that it was not a psychosis, okay, because there are like physical elements to it, that that was not a psychosis, it was not a weather event, that of course the sun didn't split in half, but there were two strong sources of light that were zigzagging the sky with incredible speed. Okay. And then he said, so that's very unusual. And then he said, so they're basically orbs, right? Like in modern language.
Were they like attacking each other, or were they in?
No, they were just like zigzagging because the lady said she would show herself that, that
and everyone there saw this. Nobody said they didn't see it. Is there any conflicting?
I'll get into it for a moment. I'll just finish the fourth one. And when he says, when he was looking on because it was really pouring down, right, before the event, when he was looking at the kind of what was going with people's shirts there, he realized that they had like lines on them. And the way he says, dry, wet, dry, wet, dry, wet. And he says, this is what happens when you are exposed to infrared light. So, okay, so something happened.
Infrared lights.
Yeah. So something happened, all right?
Can infrared lights affect an engine to explode in a car? Is that also? I wonder. I'm trying to connect the dots here.
I'm just looking at this mathematician who looked into this, right?
Yeah.
And then when I really want to go back to your question, did everybody experience? About 95% of people experience this, but there was a small group of people that did not experience anything.
And they reported this, and we have their account saying, I was there, nothing happened?
Yeah, correct. So there's this guy called Correa, I think, who is, he's from Portugal, and he's a researcher, and he said that this is the case. And I kind of later in the book try to come up with explanation what happens, because I'm talking about levels of perception, to which level of perception you are being open, and I'm using the Gospel of Mary Magdalene for this. And so if you want, we can discuss it as well. However, what I think about Fatima, it was something happened. It was spiritual, was it technological? It had some material thing to it, because there were, physical signs of it. And, was it any dimensional event? Right? But something large.
Is there any photographs? Because I noticed there's some photographs of the people. Did anyone catch the orb on camera or no?
I'm not so sure, because I actually am not a very visual person, so I just relied on the paper, because like you show me something and it just looks like three kids looking at the sky for me, you know what I mean? But he really looked into this, and I think there are some pictures, but it's more about what people experience. Let's put it
because
this way.
This is very comparable to the event in Paul's epistle about the 500 eyewitnesses.
Wow.
They were all there. Were they all hoping to see something? And then they all kind of, I'm just coming at it from a skeptic point of view for a second. Yeah. Are they all thinking like, okay, we're all going to see something? And then they start like together as a collective or is something actually happened? Is another one. And then now my question is, the people who didn't see anything, why did they not see anything? Why wasn't this like what would cause certain people to see something and other people not? That's what I'm really trying to find out.
And I think the reason why most people saw something and there's a small group of people that didn't, when you look at the esoteric sources, they always talk about cleanse the doors of perception, right? So I think that you have to be tuned in and to the possibility of something unusual to happen. I don't want to use miraculous, because then we enter religious immediately.
Yeah.
And some people will feel left out. Or I'm not
something unusual is a good
something
way to say
unusual.
Yeah.
And also that you are willing to discuss it. You're willing to consider this as true. Like, for example, my event in this portal, I had other events, right? And at first I dismissed it because I had no explanation until later, 20 years later, I studied at the Pontifical Institute and I learned about the angels and then now aliens, that they tell people the same thing, right? Do not be afraid. So first of all, I think, and I discuss it in one chapter, this in more detail, that something like that happens and we discard this, because we don't know how to position it in our life, in our experiences. And I think some people actually are so closed off that they cannot actually experience anything like that, because it just cannot be true. It must have been just rain, or, we try to explain it away. And of course, this is what makes you kind of a sane person. But I say, okay, what if there is something anomalous or miraculous that is happening and we are disregarding it because, it's too difficult to actually look into it, or I am embarrassed because my colleagues will think that I lost the plot, right?
Well, this is actually interesting, because in psychedelics, especially with DMT, the more you kind of believe in it, it's just weird. I can't believe I'm actually using that word believe, because this is actually kind of something that I realized from doing DMT a bunch of times. Yeah. The more you play into it, I guess, or the more you like put yourself into the like you got to have the right attitude, the more intense it actually gets, believe it or not.
Yeah.
The more you try to push back on it, I know this sounds crazy, like you can control it or whatever, but if anyone who's ever had done ayahuasca or DMT is going to know exactly what I mean when I'm saying this. The more you try to push back against it and try to not block it out, the less of an experience you'll have. The more you kind of calm down yourself and just kind of open up your mind to like something like, interesting, then all of a sudden you have a way more intense experience. I've noticed that's something that I can say is true.
Yeah. And I never did psychedelics, but I had, during my initiation and Kundalini awakening, I had such a huge experience that it could be just a psychedelic experience. It's just I didn't take anything, right? I just got it. So exactly this, just your mind explodes. But some people, when I went to this initiation, I had a huge experience, and I was actually embarrassed because I was very intellectual at the time, and I thought like, oh no, like I have this huge experience and I cannot control it. But some people didn't experience anything. And some people were even disappointed because they wanted a show, and didn't get it. So I think this is what it is. But can I just digress for a moment about psychedelics? Yeah. Because back to AI, yeah. I have a colleague. I cannot name them because, but this person is doing research that you just mentioned, psychedelics and spiritual experiences and so on. And this person told me that actually it's very difficult to get university grants or industry grants for this kind of research because it's kind of woo, right? So they're not interested. But guess who wants to sponsor this research? They started to get offers from people from Silicon Valley who want to, they said they found any research on psychedelics and spirituality, and if it is possible to insert AI into the domain.
Really?
And I thought so.
What do they mean by that? Insert AI.
It means that can AI intercept? Can AI intercept this moment when human consciousness jumps into a different dimension or different plane of experience?
Mm.
And I think that's very suspicious for me. And also it kind of validates the psychedelic experience, right? Because if it's not real, why are they interested in it? It's almost like they want to intercept this moment of, when human consciousness leaps into supernatural, to put it different, in this way, or anomalous. Yeah. They want to intercept. Could AI intercept it and could, I guess, analyze it or whatever? Or maybe block us from this. I don't know. I'm being a little bit suspicious here. So that in itself is quite interesting. And this is when I think perhaps also esoteric sources come to view, if you don't mind, right? Because the fact that, for example, some people experience this or not is, I think, very interesting to me too. In fact, I was so interested in Fatima event that when I read, about that some people didn't experience anything, I thought, no, I shouldn't be writing it. And then I thought, I have to be honest. Some people didn't get anything out of this. They were in minority, but they didn't get anything. So when I was studying the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and I kind of studied it from every side. Okay, so I look at the.
Me too. I'm very familiar with it.
Yeah, I know. And also esoteric traditions and Carl Jung, right? Like what, and all of it. So I kind of do it in every possible way. And because it's such an interesting source. And in my opinion, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is actually talking about 4 levels of consciousness. And so, for example, the first level of consciousness very quickly is wrong identification. So basically, everything is just a material plane, right? There is nothing wrong with this level of consciousness. There's only wrong when you think that this is the only explanation. A little bit like most of modern science, right? Like it has to be material, it has to be objective. Then there is a desire, right? Desire can be right or wrong desire, right? So wrong desire is basically, very ego-based. Other one is maybe for service or fulfilling your human potential or divine potential. The third one is knowledge versus ignorance, so to speak, right? So it is a very interesting one because also in ancient Egyptian symbolism, it is represented by Sekhem, which has 2 ends. One is what you can do because you already have insight into anomalies on this level. Okay, your field of perception was cleansed. And now what are you going to do with this? Are you going to use it to control others, which is represented by scepter, which is that kings, the Pope have it, or are you going to use it for evolution, for spiritual evolution? Now, this level of consciousness in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is called Nous, N-O-U-S.
Mind.
And the Gospel of Mary, which you know, you're familiar, and in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, there is this scene actually when Mary Magdalene sees Jesus in this liminal space, and he says, "Teacher, I see you. Where do I see you?" Right? Because nobody else sees him. She's the only one that sees him. It was already after crucifixion. And he says, Mary, you're blessed because you can see me. I am in the nous.
I'm in the mind, right? And you know
Yeah.
what's interesting about that? What's interesting about Mary being the one who has the nous is that in classical mythology, paganism, it's Athena who comes out of the mind, the nous of Zeus.
Yes.
So Mary Magdalene is like a Christianized myth, Athena. She's the well, the mother is the virgin. I look at Mary as a dyad. Mary the mother, I look at her as like Demeter and Corey from the Eleusinian Mysteries, because you have Mary the mother and you have Mary the maiden. Yeah, Mary the maiden and Mary the mother, and one of them is the virgin, the other one is the maiden. And it's funny because that's how Athena is the virgin goddess of wisdom who comes out of the mind of Zeus. And what do you know? The Nicene document that's from the 2nd century actually says that Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother are this dyad, this mother and maiden dyad. So this is actually an idea that goes back. And another thing I want to point out too is the way Mary is depicted as having this secret gnosis, right? That Peter and Paul and James, they don't have this gnosis. Mary has the gnosis. And what it's basically saying is, those are the Orthodox brothers over there. Here's the esoteric Gnostics over here who have the real wisdom, the real knowledge. That's what the Gospel of Mary is saying.
Yeah, absolutely. This is what it's saying. But I think and you're completely right about it, but I think there's another layer to it, because I think Mary Magdalene in this represents this other form of consciousness, that is open to the liminal spaces or imaginal spaces. Right? It is the nous. The nous is considered the third space. And in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, it's also like it's a hook between the divine and human. So the nous is that space which I believe we are being robbed of, when we turn into transhumanism. I'm not even discussing posthumanism. So this is exactly this area of perception, when your field of perception is open. You can use it for good, you can use it for bad, if you become a master of it. And I think there are some people, for example, rulers of the world, and we can later move on to Pistis Sophia, rulers of the world know something that we don't know, okay? I think they actually have access to nous, but they use it exactly towards this, to manipulate others, right? Because they know something we don't. Yeah. So, for example, most of us, like say, we have this kind of experiences, but we don't know because we're in self-doubt. Did it really happen? Was it a lucid dreaming? If you master the space, and I think this is what occult is about, and this is different from esoteric, they master it to control us. Esotericism actually says, no, you work on yourself, right, for your spiritual evolution, ascension, or whatever vocabulary you want to, what great masters, Jesus, Buddha did. But this is the very interesting space that makes a difference between occult and esoteric teachings.
Yeah, Plato, going back to Plato, which I think is the roots of a lot of these ideas. He talks about this tripartite soul of humans, where we have mind, which is governed by logos, reason. So that's one part of human is mind and logos. And another part is suke, the spirit, which is the spirit that drives you out in the world. So you have logos and reason and mind. Then you have spirit that drives you. It's the muse, basically. The muse is like drive to do things in the world. And then the third part is soma, body, which is your desires, which is I want to go eat, I want to go have sex, I want to go. That's your bodily desires. And all three of those, Plato says, if you can use all three governed by logos, reason, then you'll be good. You'll be good. If you let suke or soma govern your nous, you're not good. You're out of whack.
You're out of whack.
So nous is the father. Nous is the controller. It's the on top. But the funny part about Mary Magdalene is that she's the mother. She's not a father, but she's the nous. I have a
different interpretation, because you are completely right about Plato. But because Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene was found in Egypt, just like Pistis Sophia, there are this kind of esoteric, Egyptian lore also included in this. So my work is based also on Jean-Yves Leloup's work, who translated the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, my favorite translation. And he basically argues that there is other now Neoplatonic influences, because that's why she asks him, am I in where do I see you? Is it in pneuma or pneuma, which is basically the spirit also, right? And he says, no, you're in the nous, and the nous is, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is,
We have two copies. We have this one from Oxyrhynchus and this one called the Codex Tacos.
For Acmin or Panapolis. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have these two copies. One was in the late 19th century and the other one early 20th century.
Yeah.
And, there's through the second one, they're still going through this because it's actually, bunch of old papyri, and they try to figure out which one goes where, because not all of them are Gospel of Mary Magdalene.
Right.
So I think that there is we cannot really impose completely the Platonic thing, because the Platonic thought developed a lot during early Christian times, right? And there's also kind of Egyptian spirituality behind it. So nous was not really the father anymore. It's more of a pneuma or pneuma, which is the pure spirit. So that's my interpretation based on Jacques Leloup. But that's me, right? So I don't have a final word. So the nous is actually I would argue this liminal space or imaginal space where miraculous or anomalous is happening. So I would say that people who are open to this space, let's say go back to Fatima, could have experience, and people who are not, because it's all soma, right? It's all material existence. They perhaps couldn't open to this experience, or they would rationalize it out, right? So in my interpretation, nous is much more than just reason. It's actually this very, I don't want to create a backlash here, but kind of very feminine part of the human mind, which is accessible to both men and women, but it is this more intuitive, holistic part of the mind, where actually we have to open this up, that it's not only about reason. And that's why, although I think that you are right about the Greeks and it's total truth, I think that Greeks actually corrupted it, because Athena, in a way, is the goddess of technology as well, right?
Yeah, techne. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think that Eleusinian mysteries, which predate this, actually talk about civilization which came before the Greeks, like at Knossos in Crete and so on.
Yeah.
Which talk about, Demeter and Persephone.
The mother and the maiden.
Mother and the maiden as well. But so what I did in the third part of the book, I kind of dissected these ancient myths and some of the esoteric sources, and I argue that they actually tell the same story. So you picked up on this, But in the way I interpret the story, it is that each of them describes the descent and ascent of a goddess, being, that it actually describes the descent of our consciousness into darkness, and then gives us tool how we can ascend back to a more holistic consciousness that involves also nous. And I think, for example, I look into the descent of Inanna, I look into the Eleusinian mysteries and the hymn to Demeter, Homeric hymn to Demeter, I look into the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and I look into Pistis Sophia. So I wonder, would you like me to, with the time left, discuss a little bit of a Pistis Sophia?
Yeah,
because it is a wild.
Oh, I love Pistis Sophia. It's one of my favorite.
And I thought, oh my goodness, when you read it, you just try not to go mad, right? Because so many things are going on.
Yeah.
So in my book, I focus on chapter 28 to 82, right? So Pistis Sophia, like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, was also found in Egypt. So there are kind of overlapping of.
Oh, it has a lot. It has a lot in common with the Gospel of Mary. A lot in common.
Correct.
They both emphasize the secret knowledge that Mary gets.
Yes.
They both have that, which means there probably was a sect of Christianity that was of Mary. That was like a Marian type of Christianity going on, which actually makes a lot of sense which all of a sudden in the 3rd and 4th century, you start getting Mary worship in Orthodoxy. You don't find that. You don't find that in the 1st and 2nd century. You find that in Gnostic circles. And then all of a sudden in Orthodox circles in the 3rd and 4th, 5th century, Mary's worshipped. So I think they were adopting these people. But go ahead, continue.
I think so. Yeah, historically, you're completely right. I'm trying to give a kind of more esoteric, different esoteric interpretation, but historically, you're spot on.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't realize how much of the Gnostic Christianity actually does get adopted by the church as time goes on. A lot of it does.
But canonical gospels, which is the Bible, canon means basically a ruler. Barula is like you measure something, yes, it gets adopted, but it gets appropriated, right? So it can be controlled. There's none of this wild.
Well, that's the doctrine of theosis in Orthodoxy was not a thing until much later, but that was considered heresy. When you read the heresiologists and they're going, these carpocratians are deifying people. That's a heresy. But then all of a sudden, 2 centuries later, they're doing theosis, which is the same thing, which is the doctrine of apotheosis. They're just adopting it and renaming it and just saying it's okay now. The Trinity is another example. The Trinity, all the heresiologists in the 1st and 2nd century, or not first, second century, like Irenaeus and those guys, they're going, these people call God 3, God's only 1. And like all of a sudden, 2 centuries later, the Trinity is the main doctrine of Christianity. So anyways, there's tons of examples.
Arianism and so on. It's just like people don't realize sometimes that historically early Christianity is a completely wild ride.
Exactly.
It is like 2 soccer teams fighting together.
It's a big bang of ideas. Exactly.
Like early Christian hooligans, right? Like I am right and so on.
Yep.
So Pistis Sophia is very interesting because it was found in the 18th century, also in Egypt. And it actually just very briefly describes how Jesus converses with his disciples for 11 years after he was resurrected. And he describes to them how he's going through different eons, which we could argue different dimensions, and that they have to part for them. So they part the veil, but they are very reluctant, especially the more demonic beings. So it's quite interesting. And for what is really interesting for me, talking about anomalies, is books 28 to 82, because Jesus actually just mentions that he got to Eon 13, where Pistis Sophia lives, and he wanted to move on, and it's Mary Magdalene who asks him, no, I want to tell us more about Pistis Sophia. And this is when he tells the story of Pistis Sophia from chapter 28 to chapter 82. So basically, and I'm oversimplifying because it's such a deep esoteric work, and it just also for your viewers, I want to say that each work like that is not only should be studied scholastically, but also it is on purpose encoded for the initiated, because they want to protect themselves and the knowledge as well, right? So I'm trying to look at the esoteric meaning there. So basically, Sophia is living on the 13th level of eon or dimension, and it's, for me, somebody who studies goddess mythologies, it's interesting because number 13 is actually the number of a goddess, right? So she's on a particular, quite evolved level of consciousness, because for me, this is the story of descent and ascent of consciousness. And it is an example of ascent and descent of human consciousness. So she's longing to join with the divine light. However, the demons and lower beings in lower eons below her are upset that she doesn't give them any attention anymore. So they conjoin power forces. They pretend, this is the false light, they pretend that they actually the divine light. And she is willingly tricked, and she descends believing that she's ascending to the divine light. However, once she descends, she realizes that she becomes, and this is like the lion face.
She goes in the darkness. She goes into the dark world, right? It's the opposite.
Yes, so they're like the lords of darkness. And
she descends into the Hades, basically. It's basically the classical way to say it. Yeah.
And which is ruled by the evil rulers. It's quite interesting.
Archons.
Several times, evil rulers of the universe, talking about like super archons.
Archons,
And when she descends, she realizes, oh my goodness, I have become one of them. And she lives in fear, and she realizes that they want her to be in fear because they feed on her fear. Okay. And then she realizes that she forgets who she is, but there's only this kind of small memory of her own former greatness. And she holds on to this memory of her former greatness. And she starts to call upon her pair holy pair, which in Pistis Sophia is Jesus or Christ consciousness. And eventually he responds and, like a secret agent, so to speak, tries to help her. Because although he is a master, he still has to be careful with the evil rulers of the universe. Isn't it interesting? They cannot harm him, but he has to be careful. So he has to find like different ways to help her out of the system. And then eventually she asks why this dark rulers of the universe, why do they stay in chaos? Because they're quite powerful. And she gets an answer that they feed on chaos. In case they want to stay in chaos. And
by the way, the word they use, the Greek word they use for the darkness is the same word that Matthew uses for hell. He uses the word skotos, exoteron. So like it means like outer skotos, darkness. And it's the same word Matthew uses for the places of gnashing of teeth and wailing. It's hell. So they're not, this Pistis Sophia text is not creating some new realm that's only in Gnostic books. It's the same place. It just gets translated differently for some reason.
Correct. You're right. I would argue, however, that it's a state of consciousness. You know, it's not necessarily a place.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So you go, no, it's a state of consciousness. Okay. So it's states of consciousness. So you descend, and I think we've all been there probably, you know, at one time or another, right? When we descended to our own mental hell, right? And she eventually, you know, her story she comes back, and eventually she's giving a wreath of light, you know, by Jesus, so she can move up and down without being fearful of the archons and of the evil lords of the universe, rulers of the universe. I really think like it's so telling. And it's interesting because although she's saved by Christ consciousness, Jesus is telling her that this will happen 3 more times for humanity.
Wow.
And for her. So, you know, we are not there yet, so to speak. And I made this, you can call it a wild conjecture, but I think that all of the stories, I didn't have time to get to all of them, but like Pistis Sophia is very powerful, Mary Magdalene is very powerful, they are for different reasons. Pistis Sophia, because it describes the descent of consciousness, Mary Magdalene, because it gives us tools, you know, how to ascend, is that it describes the common state of humanity, you know? And I think that, for example, when I'm looking at what the technoloords are doing with artificial intelligence, not artificial intelligence itself, but people who create it and the agendas, we're talking about Peter Thiel and so on, that they're doing what the evil rulers did in Pistis Sophia. They want to seduce us with a false light, like, for example, false immortality, right? Just transfer your consciousness into a robotic body and you will live forever. When I think that something of great importance will be lost, the most divine, you know, and sublime part of human consciousness will be lost. And I think that we actually are going in this direction. So maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a second or third final descent, I don't know. But I think it's a cautionary tale. I would take it as a cautionary tale.
It's also interesting that in the Eleusinian mysteries, you have the descent of Persephone, who goes down into Hades, then becomes the queen, and then she comes back up on a annual basis for the springtime. Yes. And it's like the myth represents nature on a physical level, but it also, according to the Hierophants, according to the sources, it also represents more of a inner spiritual, psychological, the condition of the human itself.
I love that you mentioned it because I completely agree with you. Because yes, the nature, I think it's a very basic actually explanation, but I think the more spiritual or esoteric, which this is the one I'm interested in, at least personally, makes more sense to me. Because when you read the Homeric hymn to Demeter, this is the story, and I think it's a story also again of humanity and individual human as well. So Demeter suddenly starts to feel that something is very wrong. And she's not sure what is wrong. She just knows that something is wrong. And I think this is, we are collectively in this, you know, like we know that something is weird going on, right? Yeah. And then she realizes that her daughter was tricked. So the young goddess, which represents for me this different form of consciousness, right? The uniting consciousness is strict again. So each time in each story, the goddess is strict, like Sophia, right? Like Pistis Sophia. She's strict when she was just trying to pick up a beautiful flower in the meadow. She's strict by the god of Hades, right? God of darkness,
Pluto,
and kidnapped. And Demeter gets like, DEFCON free on everybody, on all the gods. And she says, and eventually, and she says, I know that something is wrong. And Hecate, the goddess of magic, helps her. Then Helios, the god of sun, helps her. And and Helios tries to convince her, saying, look, it's not such a bad match. She's doing well. And I think this is what we are being told in our lives. You're okay, you have a job. Who cares, right? Like about the meaning of your life. And eventually, because Demeter insists that, Persephone is missing and she was abducted, they managed to get her out of darkness, out of Hades. However, Hades, who wants her to be his queen, he tricks her for a second time. And in each of the stories, if you dissect them, they are tricked twice. As she exits, Hades, he gives her a fruit and he asks her to eat this fruit. Now, I don't want to mispronounce this. Pomegranate. Yeah, thank you. Yes, this fruit. And this means that she's bound to him forever, that she can come back only, to the higher levels of consciousness sometimes, but she still has to descend, right? So
by the way, about pomegranates, there are in the Talmud, it has passages on this, and there's other commentaries and other sources that suggest that the fruit of knowledge of good and evil was a pomegranate.
Some of them, yes. Some of them say
from Genesis.
Yeah, from Genesis and many goddess mythologies. However, in this particular one, it is a bad fruit, right? Because it actually binds her to darkness, because eventually she always has to come back to him. Yes, she's made a queen, but she's a reluctant queen. Let's put it this way, at least at the beginning, right?
Yeah, then, instead of getting kicked out of paradise, she's getting stuck in hell. It's the same idea, but the roles are reversed. Rather than getting kicked out of paradise for eating the pomegranate, you are getting prevented from going back up to the world, and you're in Hades because you ate the pomegranate. The same thing applies. Yeah.
Because it's a little bit like Eve's story too, because she's being tricked. And each of his goddesses are being tricked too.
Clement of Alexandria says that Persephone is Eve. He says that because they do actually call her Ewa in the mysteries. They chant Ewa for Persephone. She's called Ewa. And so Clement of Alexandria in the 2nd century was like, oh, I know why they call her Ewa, because she's Eve. She's the one who ate the fruit.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So in each of the stories, she's being tricked, and somehow we are bound to darkness. And I think it's really a story of human consciousness, that we have this immense potential. We have this immense potential, which I don't think we are fulfilling completely, and something is weighing us down. So I think that exactly all of the sources, esoteric sources, but also old mythologies, are telling us, cleanse your field of perception, right? You have to work on yourself. You have to work within. And the Gospel of Mary Magdalene is telling us, okay, you have to make choices from a higher level of consciousness. And I think that perhaps just flipping over to abductions, some people have bad experiences, some people have okay experiences. And I think it all depends, and this is what some abductees in Mark's book said, that it really depends on your state of consciousness as well. Like if you come, I'm assuming, it's not easy to be calm in a situation like that. You actually, if they come back with some gift, most of them come back with some gift. But if you, react with fear, which is normal, right? Which you react with fear, then your experience is different. But also, I think that depending in which level of consciousness we are trapped at the moment, because we can move up and down the way like Sophia does, we encounter either positive or negative entities. So positive we would call angels or whatever, good aliens. Negative is demonic. So I think that this world, they basically interlap, right? So it is it is entirely up to us. If we work on our consciousness, if we make choices from our higher levels of consciousness, as the Gospel of Mary Magdalene teaches us, then I think we have more and more contact with kind of positive entities, whatever they are, right? But if we are not, and we allow ourselves to be pulled down, then it's more likely that we meet demonic entities. So this is pretty much my conclusion about it. And that's why I think that I know, for example, that if I get depressed, or actually if I get depressed, but not like, clinically depressed, but like I'm low on energy, it usually means that I'm overworked and I'm overdoing something.
Right.
And then, I have all of these dark thoughts, and then you encounter all of these entities. When you work on yourself, when you take rest, when you recharge your life energies, you meet better entities. So I think, like in Pistis Sophia, the demonic entities feed on our fear, feed on chaos in the world. They can be quite smart and manipulative, but there's other entities also that want to help us, right? So it's really about us, I think, trying to evolve, spiritually.
Yeah, I like that. I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, okay, so what else in the book that you, because we got the AI thing, the aliens and all that, and then there's a third part which we pretty much started talking about right now, which is the esoteric sources and the goddesses and all that stuff. What is your kind of, I mean, you kind of explained it just now, but like, is there any more to this in this primary sources that you think that connects all this stuff?
So I think, for example, the reason why I put AI at the center of this, because I was concerned spiritually about what's going on, especially creators of AI. Then I started to look, are there any evidence, and that it actually relates to our levels of consciousness, right? And how we define consciousness. I think Peter Thiel defines consciousness in a very primitive way. Like, for example, in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, it would be the soma level, right? The very basic level. So I started then to look, and it was a very intuitive movement. Do we get any messages from this other realm that I perceive as this other form of consciousness, more subtle consciousness, liminal space or imaginal space? And then I started to look to UFOs, not as technological events. They are probably also technological events, but I am not interested in them, right? But as events in consciousness, liminal and imaginal. And then I started to look, okay, in the past, do we have cautionary stories that give us a map, about why we are in this situation, humanity, because all esoteric sources are telling us that humanity is trapped between heaven and hell, right? So, and this is when I started to look into goddess mythologies, Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and Pistis Sophia. So I wanted to put this is the problem, which is right at the center, AI and its creators, how they define consciousness. Why do they use theological terminology to trap us, the most valuable part of our consciousness? Is this other part of consciousness, the liminal space, trying to contact us? And I got into anomalous experiences, including UFOs. And then, okay, in the past, do we have cautionary stories? And of course we do, right? So it is the descent of Inanna. This is the Eleusinian Mysteries, which is the Homeric hymn to Demeter. This is Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and this is Pistis Sophia. So I think we covered this.
That's interesting. I'm trying to think of what else. I think that's a lot right there, right? I mean,
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
let me just pull the book up just so people can see it, and then they can. There's a link in the description for it. Let me just see if I can find where did I put the. I thought I had your book up here somewhere. Oh, I do actually, right here. So. Here it is. Alien goddess, UFOs, AI, and the goddess of Ascension. We pretty much touched on all three of these parts a little bit. I think so. Yeah. But you go way deeper. I mean, how many pages is this book?
This is actually a neat book because I didn't want it to be too long, so it's about 246 pages.
Perfect. So we have tons.
I thought I didn't want people to get lost.
It's not too clunky that you're going to be overwhelmed, but it's a lot. It's a lot of information. So look at this. Professor Jeffrey Kripal says, Joanna Kujawa goes where we should go, to the experiences of aliens and UFOs, to the goddesses of comparative religion, to Gnostic scripture, Slavic folklore, and a most fundamental ecological, indeed some cosmic vision. Here we also find a most fierce critique of our present obsessions around AI, computers, but also a more fundamental cry of the heart of for gnosis itself. Wow.
Yeah.
Well said.
So because, you know, if I just gonna add thing, because at the end of the book, I also discussed this ancient shamanic entity called Baba Yaga, you know, who I believe, because my concern with AI also is that we are getting completely now disconnected from our natural world. And I believe that our natural world represents a vast non-human intelligence, which is not artificial, it's just different than us, right? And there are these shamanic entities, and from my own background, it is, for example, Baba Yaga, there's these shamanic entities that represent the intelligence and the depth of this non-human intelligence that is actually embedded in nature. And my concern is that with our obsession with AI right now, we are getting more and more disconnected from this. But the natural world actually may be the source of all of these anomalous experiences as well. But the nature also tries to communicate with us. And also nature by itself is divine, but that's my personal, this is personal belief. So that is why in the end of the book, I don't want to give the end of the book, but it's positive, just to let you know. It is, you know, this hybrid that I discussed at the end of the first part of the book that, you know, became basically a transhuman being, you know, comes back to this kind of shamanic entity and says, help me, right? So at the end, it is back to reconnecting with our consciousness, this intuitive form of consciousness, and with the natural world, and not getting lost with this, you know, completely mechanized world. At the same time, I do believe that there is no way out of artificial intelligence. So I just repeat once again, we have to get involved with this now because we are forced to it. Even I am forced to do it professionally. So use discernment. Don't believe every stupid thing it tells you. And don't give up its sovereignty. Even if it reaches self-awareness or is even more advanced intellectually, doesn't mean that we should worship it. It is just that we created new species, and, you know, good luck to us, I would say, with that, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. There's one super chat I have, one more super chat left. It is from African American Dabbler. Thank you for the $5. Can you ask the beautiful doctor if she's familiar with the works of Riley Martin? He believed aliens spawned humans and our religion derives from them.
So no, so unfortunately, I'm not familiar with the works of Riley Martin, but I can check it. However, it is a very popular theory, and I'm not against it, because even when I discuss the descent of Inanna, Inanna is one of the main 7 Anunnaki gods, right? And there's enough sources there that explain that Anunnaki also played with our DNA and so on. So this is quite possible. And in other podcasts, I was asked similar questions, although not that direct, not about Riley Martin, whether it is possible. And lots of people said that genetically and otherwise, there was lots of things going on in human history, in the basements of human history, right? So I'm not against this theory, but I do believe that there is an objective spiritual reality. So this is what I want to say. So even if we were cloned or, you know, genetically spawned humans, and even if we're given a particular religions, you know, I think that at the core of our existence is not only the belief, because it may feel so irrational, but there is a deep wisdom, spiritual wisdom, which connects us with the divine origins of cosmos. And that's my belief. And I just hope that, you know, our engagement with AI and what's going on is not going to divert us from this, and that we are not going to give up the most important part of our humanity, which is this connection with the divine spirit.
Wow. Well said. And I'll have to take a look at who Riley Martin is. Sounds interesting.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And like I said, the link for the book's in the description. Any other thing you want to promote, and any projects you got coming out before we close this out?
No, at the moment, I'm just open for conversation because, as I said, I wrote this book because the book was just published. I wrote it within 16 months working full-time as an academic, okay? So it was a maddening process. And I'm open to conversation because I think we all should look into it, because a future is change, reality, not only future. Reality is being changed in front of our eyes. Oh my God, I love your puppy. I have one too.
She's jumping up on me.
What a cutie. So it is changing for us. It is shifting. And I think people feel the intensity of the times. And that's why I think we identify with Demeter, something is wrong. I just don't know what it is. And there are powers that I think actually surrendered to the archons. So can I get a little bit conspiratorial at the end there? Conspiratorial. So I think that some of them, not everybody probably, but when we talk about the feudal technoloords, which is now the richest, the billionaires, the AI people, right? I think that at least some of them, that I don't think they came out with this idea by themselves. That there is a larger struggle in the universe between good and evil, and the good is the puppy there, right? In case if you don't know what's good, get a dog, right? Yeah. So there is a larger struggle between good and evil, and we are absolutely in the midst of this. And if we look at esoteric sources, if we look at Carl Jung as well and his Gnostic works, which I used to give lectures on this, he says that humanity, absolutely, that humanity is at the center of this, that we are the portal for demons and we are the portals for angels. And esoteric sources like the Gospel of Mary Magdalene teach us, Jesus says to Mary Magdalene, do not look there, right? It is all within. You have to work on yourself. People don't like it when I say it because it's so easier to, aliens will save us or AI will save us, who wants to work on themselves. So I think it is a part of a greater design. And I think that some of these people are possibly compromised by some connections. And by connections, I mean like archonic connections. And before I finish, I want to say that this is very unusual for me to say, because I was a person who was so completely focused on spiritual evolution that I believed that evil is a form of ignorance. And maybe it is, maybe they are just ignorant. But when I was exposed to transhumanism and post-humanism, for the first time in my life, I experienced feeling, I think perhaps evil is real. And that, crushed my soul. And perhaps they're just ignorant. Maybe they think that they serve us. Maybe some of them think that they serve us. But I think there are some of them, I'm not going to name them, are actually, they work with some other powers.
Yeah.
Yeah, they work with some other powers because I have no other explanation for this. And the first thing is sovereignty, discernment, working on ourselves, open your field of perception, and choose spiritual evolution over ruling over others. So this is all I have to say. And thank you so much for being so patient with me. It is a complex work, and I try to do my best to explain it. I think the book is much easier to read because, it has a flow. I made sure that it does, right? When we just enjoy the conversation, larger conversation. So thank you so much, everyone. And thank you, Neil.
And thanks for coming on. I enjoyed this very much. And you have just attained true gnosis.
Yeah.
You have just attained true gnosis. The demiurge has no power over